What's up? Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Roll Pod. We're recording this on Wednesday, June 24th. Alabama had an exciting day yesterday, I think, with two commitments between Tyler Younger and Stafford Willis, and then ends it with Labaron Philon getting drafted number 22 overall to the Philadelphia 76ers. I believe it's the seventh NBA draft pick for Nate Oats, fifth in the first round. You got Kyrie Lewis in 2020, Josh Primo in 2021, Herb Jones 2021, J.D. Davison 2021, and then also you've got Brandon Miller, Noah Clowney to round it out. We're going to be jumping a little bit all over the place today, talking a little bit about Philon, a little bit about recruiting, and then we'll have some fun with one of Alex's 21 questions posted on Wednesday morning. We'll start with Labaron Philon. I said this to my buddy the day before. So on Tuesday, I said, I feel like Labaron has I don't know about opportunity, but there was a chance that he might have been some of the talk in the later teens and the 20s, like kind of a little bit of a fall. I think he was projected, Mike, you have probably a better idea, was probably projected a little bit higher than 22, but I feel like he probably landed in a pretty good spot, pretty good fit. It's all about fit, I think. But Mike, we'll kind of start with you. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, a couple months ago when he declared for the draft, I don't think he was expecting to go 22. I think a lot of people had him in the mid-teens. That was kind of the whole thing. It's like Philon was a success story of coming back and becoming a lottery pick. I didn't really happen. I think he fell a little bit towards the end. And as people have kind of said, maybe his size played into that. He was a little bit smaller to combine than he was at Alabama. Granted, he went to the combine last year, so I mean they would have had measurements from last year too. But it doesn't really matter in the end whether you go 22 or 16 or 14. I don't know, probably not. Obviously, there's a slight money difference, but he did fall a little bit from where he was expected to go a couple months ago. I think going into this draft, he was probably more like early 20s was kind of where he was projected, and that's where he went. So. I mean, it's kind of is what it is at this point. I think he came back to school. I think he went from being a borderline first round pick, maybe very early second round. That's kind of where he was by the end of last year when he pulled out, to a late first round pick, which is kind of where he was now. So there was some improvement. I don't know if it was night and day. Would he have been in a completely different spot if he came out of the draft last year? I don't think so. But he still improved his stock by coming back and having a good year. So now it's about making something out of your NBA opportunity. And it doesn't really matter where you get drafted. I mean, Josh Primo got drafted early by the Spurs. Did not work out for him for multiple reasons. Herb Jones got drafted in the second round. Has worked out for him. He's had at least 2 NBA contracts now.
Yeah.
At this point, it doesn't really matter, but I don't know enough about the NBA to say, the Sixers style versus another team style and how that all fits. But, he certainly proved himself pretty well, I think, in a lot of games last year. The Michigan game included. He was the reason why Alabama was in that game until the last 10 or 15 minutes. So I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at on that one. I think obviously for Alabama as a whole, having a draft pick again helps. I think the first few years of the Nate Oats era, he could really sell what they were getting into the draft. And there was a lot of guys that were going in and getting picked pretty early. And a guy like Noah Clowney who comes in, not as a highly rated recruit, and becomes a first round pick pretty quickly. They're kind of getting back to that because Philon was not a super high recruit, became a first round pick. Amari Allen, if he had stayed in this draft, might have been a late first round pick. Same thing. So that helps in kind of the recruiting pitch. Where you can say we produce NBA draft picks. But you're not pumping out those stats like you were 5 years ago, 4 years ago, where it was like you're producing more NBA draft picks than Duke or North Carolina or whatever it is. Like that's kind of cooled off a little bit. So it all plays into it.
Is my audio okay? I just realized I had it on mute for most of the time.
Yes, okay. You sound beautiful.
I think what you hit there is really important. And I do think it's like, okay, he slips to the 20s or whatever. Where would he have been a year ago? Because ultimately, like if you look at just his last few games, at his freshman year versus last year, like to me, it was a night and day difference. Just a guy who's much more confident on the offensive side. But I think ultimately two things were working against him. Obviously, the size, as you touched on there. But the thing with Philon was he was such a ball heavy guy who didn't seem to be somebody who could make a ton of plays without having the ball. And if you're going to be small and like that, your prospects for where you can fit in the NBA are going to be very small because not very many teams are going to be able to give you the ball that much. And how are you going to look against a guy like I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the guy's name from Arkansas who just lit the tournament on fire? Like
Darius Acuff.
Yeah, you're not at the bar is a lot higher to clear when you're a playmaker. And I think Labaron's got a ton of ability in him. I could see him having a very successful career. But this all sort of makes sense to me. The thing with Amari coming back is Amari I don't think will have those issues because he has more size and he does seem to do more things on the basketball floor. Now, does he do them at as high a level as Labaron did? I don't know. We'll see what he looks like this year. But, probably not where he wants to go. But to Mike's point, he's a first-round pick. He's going to get an opportunity. It's just what he's going to do with that. And can he – I think expand a little bit more in terms of facilitating offense. I think that's going to be his biggest area for improvement because for a small guy, he's not, I wouldn't call him a pure point guard in any sense. So can he add a little bit more of that to his game? I think that's his best path to having a long and successful NBA career.
And improving his defense. I think that, is something that Nate appreciated about him his freshman year and then kind of talked a lot last year about how that had fallen off a little bit. It's obviously you're not going to be scoring 25 points a game in the NBA as a rookie. I don't think Labaron Philon won't be. We'll see, maybe, but chances are he's probably not. So you got to make sure that you're not a liability defensively in order to have a big role in a team.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see like his contract compared to a guy that like came back. Like I look at a Thomas Houck, for example, that comes back to Florida. Is he making more money at Florida than what he would have if he got drafted like 22 overall? Like I think maybe he might be a prime, like a bad example in the fact that like they needed him back type of thing, but it'd be interesting to see how kind of those decisions worked out just with the NIL packages and all that. But
so his total contract, Philon's total contract in the NBA is going to be $17 million. That includes year one 3.5. So I mean, I
don't think he would have got to 3.5 at Alabama.
Not at Alabama, but I think if he had come back to college basketball,
maybe somewhere else. Yeah,
right. I think somewhere else.
I think there's plenty of guys that have, like, I can never pronounce his name, but Momilovic or whatever. I think Kentucky probably paid more than 3.5.
Oh yeah, I think 5 or 6.
So it's just right, and Houck probably got close to 3, maybe even 3.5 at Florida. But now it's just interesting. That was kind of a side tangent there. You mentioned Amari Allen. I'm going to call my shot. Jackson Richardson, I think you're going to be dealing with. And I feel like Alabama's 2 years in a row. Is Labaron going to come back? Is he going to stay? Amari Allen, is he going to come back? Is he going to stay? I think if I had to pinpoint one for the next roster, it might be Jackson Richardson. I feel like he's going to have a big year for Alabama. Probably one of the most athletic guys Nate Oats have. Anyway, moving right along.
My pick would be London Jemison for that, but that's just
I like that. Yeah. Mike, now you have to give a pick.
I abstain.
Fringe NBA.
I don't know if there's going to be one every year. It's going to be interesting to see because you have the Aiden Holloway situation, and theoretically, this is his senior year. But now with the new rule, he can stay for a 5th year. I don't think he's going to be an NBA type of first-round pick because of his size. He's too small. I just don't see that. And then you have Jemison, who I think just needs to produce more and more consistently and more loudly, if you will. And then you have the bigs that both of those guys now can come back for a 5th year after this season, Drew Fielder and Brandon Garrison. So I don't know, other than Amari Allen, if you really have another player. I think you're just taking a shot in the dark on the freshmen, whether it's Jackson Richardson or Caden Samuels or Terrace Bowie. Anybody's guess right now. But that doesn't mean that any of them will be even in that conversation. I mean, there's certainly been years where they brought in freshmen that aren't. So who knows? It's a little early, but if you're asking me, I would say Alabama does not have another NBA draft pick other than Amari Allen next year. Right now, that would be my projection.
That's kind of an impromptu transition. I want to hit on this just for a second. The new 5-for-5 rule, and I need to read up on it more and all the different stipulations of each rule. But Mike, you've been all over it. Alex, I'm sure you have some thoughts as well. We'll keep it kind of brief, but we'll talk about that. That's been a big production and development over the last week. Mike, kind of give us the quick rundown of this new ruling by the NCAA.
Yeah, and it changed about a month ago that what they were doing. So I want to make sure I get the wording right. It's now it gives you 5 years to play, starting with the academic year after your 19th birthday. And I think they eliminated the part about your high school graduation. The original rule had the academic year after your high school graduation. I think there was forces within the hockey world because of prep schools and all that didn't want that to continue. So now it's the academic year after your 19th birthday. You have 5 years to play. And so that means there's no red shirts anymore. There's no waivers for now. Look, this is all going to be subject to court challenges.
Let's think. The minute they do one waiver,
right,
all bets are off.
That's what I was going to say, and not to cut you off. I feel like there's going to be a big lawsuit coming from that one class. So I'm sure there already is.
There are, as of this morning, there is. So there's a lot of tentacles to this. Again, that's kind of the overall rule. Is you have 5 years to play. It's not 5 to play 4. It's 5 to play 5. But it's the 5-year period starting with the academic year after your 19th birthday.
Is it or when you enter college? Because there's obviously going to be guys like Ryan Williams who go to school a year early.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Right. You have 5 years to play. So that's the rule. And again, the previous rule, there was reasons why that was what it was. It was 4 to play 5, or 5 years to play 4, I should say. You had all the waivers for a red shirt, and you had the waivers for injury, medical red shirts. And there's legitimate reasons. Like, what if a player gets into a car accident and misses a year of college because of that? What if a player has cancer and misses a year of college? Like, there's legitimate things that happen that I think prompted heartfelt advances by the NCAA to get that player back on the field or the court. That's not going to exist anymore. And so, what's the next situation where, again, a player is in a serious injury? And I think of like Trey Sanders at Alabama, who was a running back. Remember, he was in a car accident, had a lot of internal injuries. Let's say that was his last year of eligibility. Well, under this rule, there would be no medical redshirt waiver for that. It would be, that was your last year of eligibility, tough luck. Like, you were in a car accident, that's your own fault. Like, you can't play anymore. That would be the new rule. That's how the new rule would treat that situation. There would be no eligibility waiver process. So this is probably going to end up in a bad PR situation at some point, especially if it is let's say a cancer situation from a player and he can't play anymore because of that. But there are exceptions that are written to this rule for pregnancies, which I think they really need to do for female athletes because of federal law, and also for religious missions and for military service. So there are exceptions to that. What Brett was referencing was seniors who just graduated, who played their fourth year seniors, like not guys who redshirted, but 4 and 4 seniors. A guy like Noah Williamson on the basketball team who played 3 years at Bucknell, 1 at Alabama. A guy like Cam Dewberry who played 3 years at Texas A&M, 1 at Alabama. Jam Miller would have been in that boat. Jeremy Bernard, LT Overton. 4th year seniors in this previous academic athletic year are not eligible to play a 5th year under this new rule. And that's really where these immediate court challenges are coming from. As of this morning, there's already been one with 15 players filed in Ohio that's basically saying, why doesn't this rule apply to us? If you're allowing players now to play a 5th year, why can't we, be subject to that. So we'll have to see how the state judges and courts rule on that, but that could open the door in certain states and certain situations for players coming back to play a fifth year if they're granted that injunction. So it could get very messy. And I think the general rule could also be challenged over time legally as well. But this is something the NCAA listened to its schools about, and that's something that a lot of schools wanted. There's unanimous approval of it this week, and so that's kind of where we are. But as we've learned with a lot of NCAA type issues, where we are and where we will be are two very different things.
For those not watching the YouTube, Alex feels like he has some thoughts on the way he's kind of reacting. Alex, the floor is yours.
Look, you got to draw a line in sand somewhere. So, like, for all those guys who, like Cam Dewberry, who exhausted their eligibility last year, now moving forward, they would have had eligibility. Sorry, like, it's just how it works. Like, you have to draw, because let's say you carve out an exemption for them. Well, what about the guy a year before that who never got a shot in the NFL and said, well, I only played 4 years. Why can't I get a fifth year now? What about the year before that and the year before that and the year before that? Like, you have to just say it's a new rule that only applies to people who are in college right now. End of story. Mike bringing up, and I never thought we'd prefer to use Mike Bleeding Heart Rodak, bringing up cancer and all these things about, like, was there going to be an exception? There should be no exceptions except for the ones they've already carved out, which are basically, make a lot of sense. Because, look, this isn't some inalienable right like voting. Like, you're playing a sport. If something bad happens, it's just, those are the breaks, man. Like, it sucks. We're all going to feel bad. But if you have enough ability, there are other routes you can take to get to a professional future. There's that, here's what the stand should be. But there's also, like, practically speaking, the minute you carve out any exception, it's going to get nailed. And that's been the thing to me. And look, I'm not a lawyer. I don't even pretend to be. But all of these lawsuits, you see screen grabs of the arguments. And it's always, well, what about, they did this for this person. Why aren't they doing this for us? It's all about, like, why not this than that? Like, the minute you give one exception, they're going to say, well, it should apply to this, and it should apply to that, and it should apply to this and that and this and that and this and that. And the dam breaks. And that's how we are where we are right now. So, look, the NCAA, nobody likes you as it is. You don't need to make more friends. You're not going to. Be the bad guy, because somebody has to be. All this posturing from conferences and all that, they don't want to be the bad guy. They say, oh, we're going to make our own rules. All that bullshit. They're going to have to get shoved in the corner and feel like they have no choice before they do that, because if they make their own rules, they're going to put themselves at a disadvantage with their other conferences. So they need to back the NCAA in this. When it comes time, and when it's one of their own coaches saying, oh my God, this guy had a major car accident and he wasn't able to play, you're just going to say, sorry, man. Like, it sucks. You can still go to school, you still earn a degree, but you can't play anymore, man. Somebody's got to hold the line at some point, because the minute you don't, lawyers will take advantage of that, as they should. That's their job.
And it's kind of like your cell phone company. Like, when they keep raising your prices and then you see their new customer offers, it's like, 50% off and free phone. It doesn't apply to you as an existing customer. Yeah, it's tough. But look, I think there's going to be a situation one day where, the college game day tearjerker feature where a player has cancer or a player has family situation, whatever the case may be, and you can't play anymore. And the NCAA is going to be the big bad wolf that is saying no. And that's going to look bad for them. And there's going to be a lot of uproar, and they're going to say, why can't you make an exception? Why, in this whole waiver process that they just got rid of, why isn't that still existing? Like, that all existed for a reason. And look, Alabama has players on its roster that would not be eligible under the current rules. I can think of 3 on the football team. There's 2 seventh-year defensive linemen, Jamarian Latham and Kendrick Bingley-Jones. Under the new rules, they will not be eligible. However, the new rules do allow current players to apply the previous rules to them. It just doesn't allow the players who just graduated to apply the new rules to them. So those players are still eligible, and that will be their last year, their 7th year, because they had medical red shirts. And And then also
it should be that way. It should be that way because they'd already gone down the road with the expectation that they'd be eligible. They did not prepare for the draft. They did not do all of those things. You'd be pulling the rug out from underneath them. It's totally different than those guys like Cam Dewberry who didn't have the expectation of eligibility. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're right. And Lorcan Quinn, the kicker, who is 25, going on 26 years old, former telecom linesman in Ireland, and went to Marshall, I think, when he was 24 years old, and now transferred to Alabama. So he'll be able to play still under the previous rules, even though he's outside of that 5-year window after your 19th birthday. He'll be able to play this year and 2 more years after that at Alabama under the old rules, which are more beneficial to him. However, he will not be able to play a 5th year under the current rules because he would not be within his 5-year window. So you might have Lorcan Quinn as a kicker at Alabama when he's 27 or 28 years old in 2028. So
I think Alex brought this up, but like, what about all these kids enroll early? Most of them are 18. So what does that, I don't know if you know the answer to that. And
so you're just starting your clock earlier, basically.
Okay.
You have 5 years.
Okay.
It's not a prohibition. It doesn't extend your time by enrolling early. It's a hard start to your clock after your 19th birthday, basically. Okay. So you still would have your 5 years to play. Okay. And after that, you're done.
You had a tweet up, you mentioned Aiden Holloway, Brandon Garrison, Drew Fielder. But there's 4 guys on the current roster for football. It's Bray Hubbard, Caleb Woodson, Des Zulu, and Adam Watford. So those guys could potentially.
Yeah, I think there's realistic chances in all 4 of them. I think Bray is probably the most likely guy to go into the draft. He's already tried down the draft once. Like whether Bray would come back for a 5th year, I think, would there be an injury this year or something that just really forced it to happen? I think it's more likely than not he's in the draft next year. But it could be a boost to your defense in 2027 if you can get Woodson and Umazulu back. Where, I think right now it would be surprising if either one of those guys was a early round pick in the NFL draft this coming spring. So, we'll see. A lot can change, but it does potentially add players to your roster with the caveat that that's filling a roster spot that might have otherwise gone to a freshman, which seems like a perfect segue into our next topic.
Before we get into that, real quick, you put out, it made me laugh. So, like, no more redshirt seniors. So what are they called? They're just called 5th years?
Yeah, this is my thing, yeah.
Right. They should call it. I've gone on this rant before in the show, but it should be 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th. That's how
right. That's
the new rules. Just call them by their number. Whatever year it is of their eligibility, you have 5 years, call it that. But because
you're destroying the fabric of college sports, right?
Because we're still in this mode where there's this push and pull between is college sports really about college or not? And there's obviously much broader topics about that, and they are, from a marketing standpoint, still called student athletes. I think there's still a desire or a necessity that's seen to list them by their academic year. Academic year doesn't mean shit. Like Ryan Williams.
The messed up thing is a lot of the academic years are not what you think they are, especially if they've transferred multiple times. They could be a junior that's actually a freshman in terms of
It has no bearing on where they are relative to their degree. You have guys that graduate super early. Casey Poe is a redshirt sophomore on his football team who is a graduate of the team. Ryan Williams is a junior who's going to be a graduate of the team by December. Caden Proctor graduated as a junior last year, but then you have guys who are in their 4th or 5th year who have not graduated yet, perhaps because they've transferred a bunch. It has no actual correlation. It's just there for it's back in the 1940s. Like, we're just gonna
never forget Stetson Bennett, the 7th year senior who apparently didn't graduate from Georgia.
Like, let's just be authentic and genuine and realize that this is college football. It's about playing football, and the eligibility rules now are about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's just call them by their year number. I don't think it's going to happen this year. But if I was in the SID business, which God bless them if I was, that's how I would do it.
I had some friends that were in our junior year, and they were probably in their freshman academically. But I'm sure everybody had buddies like that.
Anything. It's just it's made up.
But you did have a good segue. I didn't mean to break it up. But Mike mentioned roster spots that could potentially be taken that falls into high school recruiting. So we're going to talk a little bit about high school recruiting. Alabama is sitting 62 overall with 11 commitments. Again, it's going to be smaller class. Like, I feel like every time I talk, whether it's on the radio or some podcast, whatever, like people ask why is it going to be a smaller class, and we'll start there first. There's 8 seniors. And there's 7 or 8 seniors, and I should have done the research beforehand.
Yeah,
and then there's. Go ahead.
So you have the 2 7th-year guys, like I mentioned, Bingley, Jones, and Latham. That is their last year. You know they're gone. You have a 6-year, technically not a walk-on anymore, wide receiver in MJ Churgwin, who I guess would also be gone as well. You have 4 redshirt seniors who all will be gone this year, no matter what. Danny Lewis, Devin Tompkins, Fatutoa Henry, and Keon Sapp. So among those, that's 1, 2, 3. That's 7 guys. You only have 4 true seniors, and those are the 4 guys we just talked about: Umazulu, Woodson, Hubbard, and Adam Watford, the punter. All 4 of those guys can now come back for 2027. And so looking at your roster right now, there are only 7 players that you know are absolutely gone from an eligibility standpoint after this year. That's about half of what it was last year, less than half.
Right. The second part of that is, or to get deeper, as you look at the potential early guy juniors that leave, and I've said this, and maybe I'm missing a couple, but that's Yanze Pierre, that's Ryan Coleman Williams, potentially, and it's Xavier Brown. I don't know. Am I missing guys?
I mean, there's other guys that theoretically could go out. I think in this day and age of NIL, there's already been a pretty big decrease in the amount of early entries into the NFL draft. Like, the number has gone down because it makes a lot of sense for players to come back. On top of that, not just earning money, but now there's more eligibility for players. A junior like Daniel Hill, even if he has a great year and he's a borderline 2nd-round pick, you would still have 2 more years of eligibility and earning potential in college. So like the weights to it is different now, and there's more reasons to come back to school. And so the list of players who could come out early, and again, that early list now includes your 4th-year seniors: Bray Hubbard, Yanze Pierre, Ryan Coleman Williams, Xavier Brown. Those are the only 4 guys right now that I would feel relatively confident will come out.
Right.
There are other guys who are eligible, but even that list is fairly small. You have Hill, you have Red Morgan, you have Zay Mincy, you have Austin Mack if he had a big year, you have Connor Talty, you have Terrence Green, you have Edric Hill, Rayson Delgado, Ethan Fields, Javen James. Like, none of these guys, Carmelo O'Neal, Drake Kirkpatrick, Caden Jones, unless they have a monster year, I don't think any of those guys are going to be early entrants into the 2027 draft. And so, again, let's say you have 4 guys come out early. Let's say it's Ryan Williams, Yanze Pierre, Xavier Brown, and who was the other one I listed? Bray Hubbard. And let's say you have 7 guys that are out of eligibility. So that's 7 plus 4. That's only 11 players that are gone from your team this year. And then, yes, there will be players who will leave through the portal, and that's usually double digits, but you're budgeting to add players through the portal as well. So right now, if you're only expecting 11 guys to leave off your roster, it actually kind of makes sense to, at this moment, only have 11 freshmen coming in. What goes in must come out, or what goes out must come in. I don't know what the right terminology is. But like, from a roster number standpoint, it makes sense to have a smaller high school class when we're kind of used to these 25, and that limit's gone, but like, it was typically about 25. Yeah. Now, by the end of this week, I think we would expect that number to get closer to 14 or 15 with some of the guys that we're expecting to commit, but we don't think it's going to get much higher than that. So it will be a smaller class, but just because it's a smaller class doesn't mean it can't be a higher rated class. There are smaller classes like LSU and Ohio State who only have 14 or 15 commits who are in the top 10 right now because the average ranking of their players is higher. So yes, is it true that Alabama is taking a smaller high school class? Yes. Does that necessarily mean that it can't be better players than what they have right now? No. So there's nuance to the conversation that I think sometimes is getting lost.
Yeah, I think. Go ahead, Alex.
I was just gonna say, yeah, it's the size of the class is really it's a part of the issue, but I don't think it's the biggest issue for Alabama fans right now. It's seeing a guy commit and immediately looking at their star ranking and say, wait, why is he a 3-star? Why is this guy ranked out of the top 1,000? Like, what are they seeing here? And while Alabama's earned some benefit of the doubt in terms of how they've evaluated some guys who are not necessarily highly rated prospects, Latsir Brooks is a good example of that. It's better to bet on highly ranked guys if you want them to turn out well. So the question becomes, why are they targeting who they're targeting? And is this a financial decision and a practical decision in that sense? Or are we just, or the evaluation is going to bear themselves out? Kind of like when they got on Keelan Russell early at quarterback, he was only, I don't know how many spots he ended up going up, but he went from 4 to 5 stars and, highest rated Alabama signee in 247 history. So, there's some time for it to play out, but I think the questions facing this year's class as opposed to this time in years past when people have panicked for no reason, I think there is a reason to sort of look at it and kind of look at it askance and saying, what's really going on here?
And I think it's fair for people to kind of look at guys that they've missed out on, that Mitchell Turner, who just went to Ole Miss. I think we're expecting Hayden Stepp, the cornerback, to go to Oregon. We'll have to see where Monshawn Sales go. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah.
If he goes to Indiana. Like, that's one conversation, is like, are they hitting on the guys that they're targeting who are the higher ranked guys? I don't know if that means we need to dump on picking up the 3-stars, because like, it's like building an NFL roster. If you need a guy at a minimum salary to basically be a practice squad player for you or be an off-season camp body, for lack of a better term, like, that's how the NFL works. Like, if we're going towards more of an NFL system, you still need those sort of players on your roster within your overall budget. And so there's a 105 player roster limit now in college football. There's no more scholarship limit. And if you get a guy who's cheap, who can be a 85th, 90th, 95th player on your roster, who comes knowing that he's probably not going to play right away, at least, and comes knowing that he's not going to get paid very much, then I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that. It's just a different conversation. It's a different part of your roster that you're zooming in on versus, are you hitting on the guys that are going to fill the spaces that you need? And if you're not doing it in the high school recruiting realm, which they've had high school freshmen come in, Dijon Lee and et cetera, who've come in and played right away. If you're not getting those guys, then are you developing the ones that you're trying to keep? All these freshmen from the last 2 classes, can you get those guys to the next level, or are you bringing in portal guys this offseason? So I think your overall view of this has to be tied with the portal class that comes in January.
Yes.
They have a great portal class and they saved all this money for that, and they hit on all the guys they wanted to, then it's going to soften the blow of not getting some of these guys in the high school class. But if they don't, then it kind of becomes a double whammy. And maybe they're putting their money towards retaining players, but what if those players don't pan out this year? Like, there's no guarantee Jackson Lloyd's going to be a great player at left tackle this year. And so are you going to pay him a bunch of money to come back for a third year? Or are you going to have a budget in place, kind of we're only going to pay you so much because we're still looking for more out of you? So there's still questions about the guys you might be looking to retain after this year. Yeah. But it could also go the other direction. What if Keelan Russell has a great year at quarterback and is a Heisman candidate, and all of a sudden Miami and Texas A&M and Oregon are offering him astronomical numbers to come and play quarterback for his third year? Then can you get into a bidding war with them to keep a Keelan Russell for another year, if that is the path that he would choose, is to take the highest bid? I'm not saying he would, but if that was the situation, then would you be able to keep a guy like that? So there's a lot of,
especially when you have Jet Tamala, Trent Seaborn on the roster, and you've got, by the way, Elijah Haven, who did not come cheap, who's the one star of this class. It's, where is your money committed? That's why we have general managers now.
Right.
This shit is complicated now, and it's forecasting and it's projecting, And there's just a lot of unknown variables in that.
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest unknown is what Mike hit on is, are you doing this with the thought that you're going to spend more in the portal next year? If you do that, I think a lot of Alabama fans will be fine because they've wanted to be more aggressive in the transfer portal because they've seen it work in other places. And ultimately, this is a reflection of where Alabama's limitation is because Texas doesn't have to decide. They can do both. You look at the transfer rankings, and they got two of the top players at one position in running back. And by the way, you stole Smothers from Alabama from underneath them. And they can go spend money in high school recruiting. Yeah. So you have to be judicious. It's not an enviable spot to be because you have the expectation of being Alabama without the money that people expect you to have at Alabama. So where do those two things sort of meet? It's a question of how many guys did they hit on this last portal class? How many stay? How many work out? Because I think there's a lot of people assuming, they got all these guys with multiple years of eligibility. They'll have them for multiple years. Are you sure about that? I mean, they got a bunch of transfer offensive linemen. And how many of them are going to play? And they've already shown that they'll leave once. Why won't they leave again? So you're only getting one or two offensive linemen in this recruiting class. Is that going to ultimately be a wise decision? Because remember, all your depth from last year got depleted in the portal. Where's all this going to go? I understand the thought process with it. I just think it opens you up to a bunch of different variables that could end up working against you. If you win on the field, everything will be fine. If you spend money in the portal, everything will be even better because fans will be happy. If you don't do that, it's suddenly like, okay, you're on the hot seat as a coach. We're going to sell a vision of the future. Oh, by the way, don't look at the fact that we got the 60th ranked recruiting class. Our future's still bright in spite of that. That's going to be a tough sell. It's going to be a tough sell.
It's how general managers are graded and evaluated on a professional level is how do you use your draft picks? What was the return from your trades? Are you getting good value on your contracts? Like, are you signing the right free agents? Like, that's how they're evaluated. And I think the same thing is or has come to college football. And it doesn't matter who your general manager is. Like, I think the money situation is the money situation in Alabama. Like, I don't think you're going to be in a spot like Oregon or A&M is, but still within that realm and of what money you have, how well are you using it? How efficiently are you using it across your roster? Is kind of how people are going to evaluate you at any school, not just Alabama, but general managers now pretty much everywhere. So
let's be optimistic for just a second. So Alabama fans don't jump off a cliff. Brett, you know these guys better than just about anybody. Like, who are some of the 3 stars who you're like 2 or 3 where you're like, I can see in the eventual recruiting rankings they're going to rise up? Because you could tell with a lot of those guys last year, where it's like he's not going to stay a 4-star for very long. He's not going to stay a 3-star for very long. We could see that coming. Granted, they haven't played their senior years yet, but are there guys like that who you just, this one makes too much sense for Alabama, get on them early?
Yeah, I think the one I would circle is Varian Pauley out of Mobile, Alabama, who's 6'5", 265, has already talked about how he's going to get up to kind of that 295, play that interior defense line. I think he's going to have a big year. I think Nigel Newkirk has potential to jump up as well. So we'll follow it. I think what people who love recruiting love to say they understand everything, but there's, I think, 3 or 4 more recruiting updates before December. I know we've got to close it out here. I said we were going to talk a little bit about Alex's 21 questions. We won't get into deep it, but I'll throw this out just to close. I know Mike's got to run. Most touchdowns scored by who, Alex, this fall?
I'll stick with my pick in my piece, which is Daniel Hill. And it doesn't mean I think Daniel Hill is going to be the feature back and get 1,000 yards. I just think he scored 6 touchdowns on 75 carries last year. Very easily double his number of carries, and you're talking about double-digit touchdowns. And he's going to be the guy they should turn to in red zone situations. He's just built for that. I could see Ryan Coleman Williams making a run at that, but I think Daniel Hill's probably the best bet.
Yeah, I have a hard time thinking of anybody else right now. I don't think your quarterbacks are going to be running a ton in the red zone like that. I think Keelan will be more likely to score some touchdowns, but I don't think it's Jalen Milroe numbers. I think Daniel Hill's your most likely guy right now. And again, I don't know if there's, and besides Ryan Coleman Williams, I don't know if there's a third guy that just jumps off the page as being the best candidate.
Yeah.
I don't really have an answer. Maybe
I mean,
I'll
Monster
look
Brooks
smart.
is the possibility. It's hard for a tight end. Like, as much as I like Caleb Edwards, I don't think he's going to become a touchdown machine.
I was going to mention Caleb Edwards, but they're going to run the ball at least try to run the ball in the red zone more than
it happens. Like Cam Latu had a bunch of touchdowns,
right?
But it's just that's hard to predict, man. It's just like this guy getting open on a little 2-yard route. It's like sitting here in June, I can't really picture that necessarily happen in each game.
Yeah. Good show. Another good show on Roll Pod. Find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. We'll be off next week for the 4th of July holiday, but we'll be having some recruiting news, I believe, during that holiday. So stay locked into Bama247. Thank you, guys.